Hello and thank you for watching the Angry Rooster Creations channel. Today we are doing another fountain pen related video. In this case we are doing a test, a light fastness test of multiple fountain pen inks. Now I have already done one light fastness test on this channel. I'm probably going to put a video card up here for that video if that sounds like something that you would be interested in, or especially if you watch this one and interest you in the prior video, where I mostly tested Noodler's Polar inks that I have, Noodler's Bad Blue Heron, Noodler's Legal Blue, and Noodler's Bay State Concord Grape. And so I have done another series of ink tests for some of the inks that I have. Also, some of these are samples. I don't actually have bottles of these inks, I just have samples. And I'm once again doing a light fastness test with these 7 inks. Now, the 7 inks that I have this time around are Noodler's Heart of Darkness, which is an ink that I have used a lot of. I do use this a lot for inking sketches and drawings. I have extensively used this ink. This is one that I expect to not fade and to pretty much be the same at the end of this test as what you see it now. The next ink is Noodler's Whaleman's Sepia. It is Noodler's Manjiro Nakahama Whaleman Sepia. It is a Goulet Pens exclusive. It's a kind of unique ink. It's one that I'm curious about, because as far as I know, I don't think this is considered an eternal ink. I think they might consider this one partially bulletproof because it is water resistant, but it has some odd properties, some color changing properties when you, say for instance, hit it with bleach and things. But I'm not sure about light fastness. I don't think it's listed as an eternal ink. So this is one I'm curious about to see if it fades or degrades. The third ink here is Noodler's Lexington Grey. This is a ink that is both considered to be bulletproof and eternal. UV light proof. It says so on the bottle. So the claim from Noodler's is this is a waterproof and light fast ink. So we shall see. The fourth ink here, is Noodler's Liberty's Elysium. This was a sample vial that I had. This particular ink is also a Goulet Pens exclusive. This one is not a bulletproof ink. In the video that Brian Goulet does talking about this ink, I know that he says in that video that they specifically chose a formulation that gave more vibrance at the cost of permanence. I think that was more in a reference to it not being as waterproof, but I'm interested to see how this one handles the UV light. I expect this is one that we might see some fading in. The fifth ink on the paper here is Noodler's North African Violet. This is an ink that is not listed as a bulletproof. I think they may consider this a partially bulletproof because it's sort of water resistant, but I don't think it's claimed to be light fast. I really do like this color of violet here, of this ink. I hope it does well, because if this does well in this test, I'm probably going to end up buying myself a bottle of this. If it completely fades out, I might not, because it's a color I'd love to use on an art piece, but, you know, we'll see how that one holds up. The sixth ink on the paper here is Noodler's Fox Red. This one is a ink that is, from my understanding, mixed specifically to be a very light fast ink, if I understand. It's considered bulletproof and eternal. So this one should not fade, but we shall see. And the last ink on the paper here is Noodler's Dostoyevsky. It is a turquoise ink from the Russian line, and I probably butchered that name. I think they consider this bulletproof and eternal. I have a sample of it. I have seen the label from this ink, and the bottle is all written in Russian, so I can't read whether it claims on the bottle to be light, fast, and eternal. Some of the tests and things I've heard about it seem to suggest that it is, so I'm hoping we shall see that this one doesn't fade, because I do like this color of ink. Now, as far as how the method is going to go here, this is the sheet of 20-pound copy paper. This sheet of 20-pound copy paper is not going to be hung in the window. This here is going to stay inside. It's going to stay covered, and so it won't be exposed to light. This is our control. The next 3 sheets here are the 50-pound Blick white sulfite drawing paper, the 50-pound Koh-i-Noor sketch paper, and the 98-pound Canson mixed media paper. All 3 of these are going to be taped up in a window, taped directly to the glass, facing out on the south side of my house, so that they will be exposed to direct sunlight for the next month. So for 30 days, these will be exposed to direct sunlight, and at the end of that, I will bring them in, and we're going to do a comparison side by side with this and with the control, and possibly even maybe do a side-by-side writing comparison on the paper. Now, I don't necessarily want to call that definitive, because some of these inks I only have in sample form, and I won't be able to refill the pens with fresh ink. So if some kind of drying occurs inside the pen over 1 month of having the pen inked, the ink could become more concentrated in the pen and therefore write darker than it would if you had just filled the ink out of a bottle. So that is something that could skew the results. So I'm going to mostly default to comparing the inks on this paper with how they appear on the control paper. So I'm also going to write on these with a few pens that I know are going to fade, just for reference, to know that I did not fudge this test. I've got 3 colors of Pilot G2 gel pens, which I know for a fact are going to fade. I have a Papermate Inkjoy here that I know is going to fade, and a Bic grip roller that, according to the last test, is going to go from being black to brown. So I'm going to go ahead, write in the margins on these, my control pens. I'm going to speed that portion up, and then after that sped up portion, the next cut is going to be the results of this test. And before I do that, I'm just going to show, here is an old broken watch. Today is Sunday, April the 20th at 1:17 in the morning. I'm trying to cram some videos in and staying up quite late doing it. So anyways, I'm going to go ahead and use my control pens to write on here. And like I said, I'm going to speed this up, and after the cut, it will be 1 month in the future from now. Alright, and we are now back from our 30 days of exposure to sunlight with these inks. And just to show, here is an old crusty watch with a broken band. You can see it is indeed May the 20th. So these were put up on April the 20th. Now, the paper you're looking at right here, just for reference, this is our 20-pound copy paper. This is the control sheet. This was placed in a manila envelope, and it was placed on my bookshelf up above a window. No light got to this page whatsoever. And the one I'm going to do the most comparison to is going to be the Blick. A-B comparison between this paper and the papers that were in the window is going to be the Blick, because it is the closest of the art papers to a copy paper. And I don't know, you might be able to see already there were some changes. So we're going to kind of go through what I kind of seen, because I've already looked at these a little bit. The Heart of Darkness. It is a light fast black ink. It is every bit as light fast as it claims to be, at least in this 30-day test. Now you will see that the Whaleman Sepia here. Okay, this is an odd one. Like I said, there were parts of the components of the ink that are permanent, components of the ink that are less permanent. And as you can see, so this ink's a little strange. I don't know if anybody that's watching this maybe have watched my video where I tested this, because I believe I mentioned this in the video, and I know other people that have tested this ink have said this. When you're writing with this ink, it goes down brown, and then it dries this sort of gray color. It's an odd color. It's a neat color, but an odd color. Well, essentially, whatever causes this ink to be gray is not light fast. And then the components of the ink that seem to be light fast are the brown dyes in this ink. And it's not like this ink, it just changed color. It's still pretty, you can really see it on the page. It did not really necessarily fade on the page to where it's become hard to read. The brown that's on the page is very much there on the page. It's just, as you can see, some of the dyes that give it that sort of grayish brown look faded out completely, and this just turned into a brown ink. Now, if this went longer than 30 days, would that brown eventually fade? I can't say that for sure, but it is still very much legible after 30 days of direct sunlight exposure. So I would say that some of the components of this ink are light fast, but know that if you use this ink and you display it, it's going to go from this gray color to essentially turn into a brown ink. And another thing, I don't know if this is going to show up too well, but that brown ink that it has turned into actually has quite a bit of shading. I don't know how well it's going to show up, but there's visible shading in that brown, which before, when you write with the ink normally, you don't see, which is kind of odd. Now, the Noodler's Lexington Grey, if anything, it looks a little bit darker on this blick paper than it does on the copy paper here. That has more to do with how the ink reacts to the various different papers. But as you can see, like I said, the odd part is the papers that were put in the windows seem to be slightly darker, if anything, than the copy paper. This ink did not fade. It does not appear that it has faded at all, not even like the smears and things, which are even, you know, they're still very much there. It even says that it's UV proof or otherwise UV resistant on the bottle. So that is a claim that is made about this ink that appears to be, at least in 30 days time, appears to be true. Now, the Liberty's Elysium. It is not nearly as vibrant as it was. You can see there, some of that vibrancy has faded. Now, it is still very much there. And in some places, it looks like it might not be quite as on the paper, that B there, but it is still very much legible. It by no means has completely disappeared, but the vibrancy of that blue has gone. So, like I said, I believe they sort of call this a semi-bulletproof ink. It is not truly a light-fast ink, at least in this 30 days here. Now, if you left it longer, would it completely disappear? I'd say there's a good chance it won't, but just know that if you write something with your Liberty's Elysium and you leave it exposed to sunlight, it is going to fade on you. Now, the one that kind of makes me really sad, because I really like the hue of this color, is the Noodler's North African Violet. Kind of like what happened with the Bay State Concord Crepe in my first test. It has pretty much completely disappeared off of the paper. There's some hints of where it was, but it's almost completely gone, which is very unfortunate, because like I said, I really like that color of purple, but because it's going to fade out like this, I would not really end up using it to draw or make art with, because if I displayed it, you know, it'd wash out. Or, you know, when I watch how they'd fade out, which is saddening. Now, the last two here, the Noodler's Fox Red, I am going to write on the paper with this one, with the pen that I have filled with this. Because looking between these two, it looks like it might have faded some. But I even rewatched the part of the video, the first part of this video that I recorded a month ago, and even on there when I'm kind of showing the papers, I think part of that might be that the hue was different between the various types of paper. But it seems to kind of be that it might have faded on maybe all of them. So it almost seems to me like the Fox Red may have faded some, which is a little surprising because I believe this is one that's supposed to specifically be, I think it, my understanding is correct, I believe this might actually be a pigmented ink. I don't know that for sure, but I've heard people say that before. I kind of tried to look up some things about it, but I believe this one's supposed to be one of their most, you know, eternal light fast and bulletproof reds that they make, but it looks like it may have faded some. And this kind of the same with the Dostoyevsky, however you pronounce it. It is also very, I don't even think this is going to show up too much on the camera, because looking in the viewfinder here, they look almost the same, but it has faded some. Now, neither one of these are very extreme in the difference. Like, this Dostoyevsky looks, if anything, it looks a little less vibrant than it does on the copy paper. Now, like I said, some of that could be, well, I don't know. On the Koh-i-Noor here, for instance, maybe it looks like it could have faded a bit more. And then if we bring up the Canson here, yeah, I think it has faded some. Not a lot, but some. So there is a little bit of a loss of vibrancy, but it's still very much there on the paper. Now I'm gonna, real quick. Okay, no, it looks like the hue's the same on the copy paper. I should do this on the Blick, because if I forget how to write an X. Now that's still, no, it's dry now. It looks like it has faded ever so slightly. Not much, but I feel like I can see a difference in the hue there. And actually, this is another one I'm going to check real quick. So this pen I have used, the Lexington Grey, and I feel like it has slightly, there's less ink in this pen, and it has dried out some, and it has gotten darker over time. So that was me writing there on the copy paper. Yeah, so this ink is writing out of this pen right now, because it has been sitting for a while with not a lot of ink in it. It's writing a little darker because it has sort of concentrated in this pen. So if I write side by side, I think it might give a little bit of a skewed result. I'm going to go ahead and write on here anyways. Like I said, I don't think the Lexington Grey should have filled this pen up earlier. No, it's pretty much the same. And then I know the Heart of Darkness didn't fade. Yeah, that's pretty much the same. Now I will show the Whaleman Sepia. You can definitely see on the Whaleman Sepia the change in hue there. And then the Liberty's Elysium. Once again, it is very much, you can definitely tell that it also is, well, may not show as well on the camera as I was thinking. No, you can see it on the camera. Yeah, it has definitely lost some vibrancy. In the Dostoyevsky, this pen might hard start. This is a bit of a drier writing ink, and I haven't really written with this little pen in a bit, so it might hard start on me. Let me see if I can get this. There we go, come on. Yeah, probably putting this in an extra fine hooded nib was not the best choice of pen, to be honest. And like I said, I only had this in sample form. Well, I'm not going to be able to give you a perfectly good writing test. It's not really wanting to write. I only had this ink in sample form, and I had used this to fill a different pen at a different time. So I wasn't able to refill this pen again. And after a month, it didn't really hold up too great in this particular pen. So, and I haven't really been writing with this extensively. Done a little bit of writing here and there, but this has been sitting for quite a while and not been written with. So, but if I actually compare that as to how it looks on the copy, yeah, I think it has faded a little bit. Not a lot, but a little bit. So, you know, and I'm not really going to bother with checking the North African Violet because it pretty much disappeared off the paper. And I guess just to show from my controls here, you can see my little G2 gel pens are gone. Paper Made Ink Joy is barely there, and that Bic grip roller, don't know how well that's going to show here, but kind of like what I said was going to happen, it turned from black to brown. You can kind of see there. So my controls reacted the way I thought they would to the light, and you know, there it is, all together. The Heart of Darkness, Lexington Grey, no problem, hold up just fine. The Whaleman Sepia changed from gray to brown. The Liberty's Elysium, you know, it changed from gray to brown, but it's still legible after a month of direct light exposure, so I would consider it UV fade resistant. With an asterisk, it changes color. The Liberty's Elysium lost a lot of the vibrancy, but it is still also very legible on the page. So, once again, I would maybe consider this to be fade resistant. Or I guess, you know, both of these did fade, but they did not fade completely off the paper. That's the reason I'm saying fade resistant. Is as long as the ink is still legible on the page. Note that they change, they do fade, but they will still be legible on the page. Obviously, the North African Violet is not at all fade resistant. It completely disappeared off the paper. You can barely even see hints that it was there. Very sad, but once again, like I said before, this was not listed as or claimed to be a light resistant ink or light fast ink at all. And as you can see here, it's not. So, and then the Fox Red, I would call these, the Fox Red and the Dostoyevsky, I would call definitely fade resistant, although there is a slight bit of fading that I can see happen with both of these inks. It's not a lot, but there is a little bit. So, very much within the fade resistant. And I don't know if you would necessarily call these light fast, because you can see some, you can perceive some amount of a change. It's so minuscule, if you're not directly comparing it, it's hard to tell. So You know, but it's not quite like the Heart of Darkness and the Lexington Grey, which look just exactly like they did when I wrote them before, like nothing ever happened to them. But still, I mean, you got to really get in close and have like a direct comparison to something that's newly written to really tell that these have faded any. So, very much strongly within that fade-resistant category. So, anyways, that's going to do it for this video. I think I've probably went a little too long with my getting a little too wordy with this, but you know, like I said, I think I've said this before, this is not the most scientific. There are actual proper scientific methods, like very standardized scientific methods for using specialty equipment and like swatches of wool and some other stuff, how they actually set a standard for light fastness. This, you know, is sort of my, you know, layman science here of just taping up paper in a window for a month. This, the way I conducted this test would be considered torture, like essentially as a torture test. For the most part, you're not going to draw an art piece and stick it right in a window in direct sunlight. You're also not going to write on a piece of paper and stick it in a window in direct sunlight. I would say with any of these, even with the North African Violet, if you're writing in a notebook, that notebook stays closed, stays on a bookshelf, isn't exposed to light, you'll probably never see it fade. But if for some reason you gotta write something as a memo, or you're gonna do, you know, draw a picture and display it somewhere, you write a memo and tack it up on a bulletin board or something, if it's something that's gonna be left out for a long time, or, you know, something of that nature, you know, obviously maybe some of these inks would not be a good choice for that. And then others, just realize that you'll probably still be able to see what was written or drawn, but there's going to potentially be changes in that ink. And on some of the others, changes are going to be barely perceptible. So, with all that having been said, I hope that you enjoyed this video, that you got something out of it. I thank you for watching, especially this far, if you've watched the entire video and listened to all of my rambles here. If this was informative, if this was relevant information to you, you got something out of it, you know, this helped to educate you on maybe making purchase decisions. If you're somebody like me who likes to draw with your inks and you want to know just how light fast they are, and, you know, maybe one of these inks is one you wanted to know about, you know, I'd really appreciate a thumbs up down there if this was an informative video to you. You know, if you have any other questions about these inks, about the test, you know, kind of how I did it or whatever, or, you know, maybe you have criticisms or critiques, etc., you know, comment sections are open down there. I usually get to read all the comments. I try to reply back, because I don't really get a lot of comments. I don't get a lot of views. But, you know, all that input is helpful for me, and hopefully may be helpful to you if I can answer any questions that people have. And if you watch this video, maybe you've watched some of my other videos, and you're okay with putting up with my rambles, and the length of these videos doesn't put you off, and you appreciate the information I try to put together in these videos, I'd really appreciate a subscription, because that would really help me out. But with having all that been said, I do thank you for watching, and I hope to catch you on the next one. Bye.